Hey, this is Blake here out. I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the classic version of Carrier Command. That pixely gibberish you saw there is the loading animation that the game draws to the screen, so you don't realize, so you know that it's still loading and hasn't just failed. All my Commodore games used to do that. This is actually the Amiga version. When I played this game as a kid, I played on the Macintosh version. I've dicked around, and as far as I could tell, other than the number of colors, they are identical. I played on a Mac Classic that only had a black and white display, and this is Amiga with, I believe it's drawing 16 colors right now. But I also believe if you ran this on like a Mac 2, which has a color display, you actually got the colors. But anyway, let's go ahead and start a game. This game is partially procedurally generated. I don't know if you'd call it procedural generation. It's more just like the data is highly compressed and it has to spend a little second decompressing it. So anyway, this is your carrier. You can control it directly if you want. It's kind of slow. Most of the time you'll probably be controlling it in autopilot mode. At least I always did. I don't think I ever really controlled it manually except for when learning the game. So for the carrier, here's our strategic map here. So as you can see, our map is full of islands. We have a big grid. I think it's 8 by 8. There's whole crap loads of islands on it. That one located in the middle of nowhere is a huge pain in the ass, I remember. It starts the enemy out with 8 islands and me out with just 1. So the enemy gets a little bit of an advantage. It's AI-driven enemy in this mode. So basically the goal here is I'm going to set up a resource network. And by doing that, I need to capture islands. So let's go ahead and just travel to our first island here. So let's go ahead and move my cursor. This game is entirely mouse-driven. It's actually slightly annoying. And I remember that in the Mac version too. It doesn't even have like alternative keyboard controls. Let's go ahead and set a waypoint here. Let's boost our speed up to max, which is going to be difficult because this mouse emulation does not have good resolution here. You know what? I can use the arrow. There we go. Let's go ahead and turn on autopilot. Whoops, I forgot to actually hit program. So program course set, and let's go ahead and turn on autopilot. And that will get our ship going towards the waypoint. Hopefully, I kind of spun it around. So one of the problems with this game is the autopilot is not great at avoiding collisions. So it's possible if you're on like the west side of an island, there it goes. It just grounded itself because it hit the shallow water near the island. If you're on the other side of the island, it will fail and actually hit the island on its way there. It's just kind of a straight line autopilot. It's not anything interesting. So, okay, so our carrier is on its way at full throttle. Now what we can do is let's take a look at some of our carrier's features actually while we're here. So the carrier screen, we can drive it. Here's our repair screen. You can see our hull took a little damage when we got grounded. We didn't get grounded very badly, so it's going to repair itself pretty quickly. These are all the different various systems. You can click on one to get more detail. There's not a lot of detail to give these except for what priority the repair is, whether the status is damaged or not. And it gives you a little, a little like graphic of where that item is located. Surface to surface missiles. Here's our flare launcher. Here's our laser cannon. Here's our drone turret, communication system, radar, and engines. So the most important thing here is obviously the auto repair system. If your auto repair system gets too damaged, it cannot repair itself, and then you've basically lost the game, more or less. This is our resource screen. This is listing all of the various items that are on our carrier right now. We have air-to-air missiles or air-to-ground missiles, here's 4 guns that go inside the mantas. We'll look at that a little more when there's mantas. This button, if you're on your supply island, this button will tell the island to construct a barge of supplies and send it to your carrier. So you can see here's our various fuel meters for the various types of vehicles we have. And then messages section. Here's our actual carrier defense. This is our cannon. It's a laser turret. You can shoot it. Very exciting. Let's go ahead and stop it. You could also zoom in, etc. This is actually a very good weapon for destroying the enemy carrier. It's not really good for much else. It's a very powerful weapon, but it's very hard to hit anything with. Here's our flare launcher. If you have a missile lock, you can launch a flare. going to go ahead and do one because why not? And the missile will hit the flare instead of you. Pretty basic. Viewing drone, I'm going to go ahead and use one too since we have a bunch of storage. This is basically a recon drone that gives you kind of a bird's eye view of what's nearby. I've never made any use of this. Like, I never found it that useful. But you can see all it's showing is basically our carrier. It just launches straight up and then falls straight back down. So there's really not to it. We also have these defense drones. These are useful if you are being attacked by enemy walruses, which are their tanks. I don't think I've ever seen the AI do that. So when I played this game, I didn't very often get into combat with the enemy carrier. So maybe that's more useful than I think. So here's our walruses. So walruses are little amphibious tanks. They look something like this. And let's go ahead and load one up. Let's put a chemical laser on it. Why not? So we're gonna put a laser on it. You can see that these are the various equipment. There's 3 of these in my carrier, and if I go back to the carrier inventory screen, you'll see it shows that. There's also a surface missile for these. Command center virus bomb. What this will do is if you disable the defenses on an enemy island, you can go onto the island and hit it with the command center with the bomb, and it will slowly turn into a friendly island. It takes a while. And here's our command center resource builder. So there's 3 different types of islands. There's resource islands, which are basically mining fuel and iron, I suppose. There's defense islands, which are basically just full of aircraft and turrets and stuff to defend it against the enemy carrier. And there's factory islands, which build more advanced things like your missiles and etc. Let's go ahead and turn our first island into our resource island. Actually, you know what? I changed my mind. Let's turn it into a factory island. Okay, so we have this this walrus is all set to go. Now the walrus also has a driving interface, which is, you'll notice that the joystick icon is always the driving interface, and the square pointing to another square icon is always the map interface. So walruses also have, whoops, I just realized my carrier isn't on autopilot, is it? Wow. My carrier has been going absolutely nowhere for the last, while I've been talking. That's awesome. Anyway, walruses also have autopilot. Let's make sure my carrier's turning there. Yeah, it looks like it's going in the right direction now. Okay, so, and it has its own map marker. So what you can do here is you can center your cursor on the island you want. I don't remember the range of the walrus. They don't have enough range, if I recall right, to get from island to island. You do need to use your carrier as an intermediary, but they do have a pretty long range. And in fact, one of the items you can equip on a walrus is basically, it's a fuel pod that lets you transfer fuel. That's useful, kind of, if you ever get to a situation where your carrier is out of fuel. You can send a walrus to one of your friendly islands, and I believe you can load up on fuel in the airfield there. And I'm going on a lot of memory here, and I don't remember exactly how this stuff works. But I'm pretty sure you can use the walrus to re-equip your carrier with enough fuel to make it to the island, and then refuel more directly. So what I've done here is for Walrus 1, which is the one we just did the loadout of. There's 4 of these, by the way, so you can actually have 4 of these going simultaneously if you really want. I loaded it up with the base building virus thing. It's kind of, the base building's kind of like just like a nanotech excuse. It's nanotechnology, whatever. And then we can launch it whenever I'm ready. Here's the launch button, and then here's the return button. Your walrus has to be located in what's called the docking cone or whatever to automatically dock back with the carrier. So let's go ahead and see how close we are to our island. Not very close. Okay, well, let's talk about mantas for a second. So mantas are our aircraft. Mantas also have a control view, which is nothing because it's in the hangar right now, and a loadout. So let's go ahead and play with mantas because they're kind of fun. So these are our aircraft. These are useful for attacking hostile islands. In fact, what you really want to do is load up a ground attack laser and just blow up all of the stuff on it. You can also put a couple missiles on there, whatever. And the enemy just captured Twilight. Damn. Okay, so here's our various launch controls for mantas. So mantas have elevator. You can raise one up, raise it down. Obviously, only one of them can be on deck at any time, and then you can take off. Now, when you take off, by default, they just circle in the position where they've been taken off at. So you'll see it's just on autopilot, and it just kind of circles. So let's go ahead and turn off autopilot, and let's fly. So I'm going to fly this manually a bit. I have a speed control, which is arrows on the keyboard. I have my lasers I can fire, which look pretty good. Here's the carrier we just took off from. As you can see, the carrier's actually really fast in this game for whatever reason. So let's go ahead and buzz our own carrier. There's our gun. You can see our laser gun on top of the carrier. Pretty cool. And I can switch to missiles. I think the missiles have a lock-on capability. Yeah, you can't fire them unless you're locked on. Unfortunately, this island is actually completely empty, so that's not useful to us. So I'm gonna go ahead and lower my speed to lower my fuel consumption, and let's set our autopilot. I don't remember exactly where the ship's going to stop, but let's set our autopilot here and have our Manta circle. What we'll do is, as soon as our Manta and ship is in range, we will. I'm pretty sure it keeps circling if it hits the autopilot point. Yeah, it does. So it'll keep circling. So our Manta will. Oh, good. It looks like we got it almost spot on. Once it gets in range, we can dock our Manta, and that's done on this screen. It's still out of range, as you can see. The Manta has to be pretty close, but once it's in range, you can hit the this button, and it just automatically docks onto the elevator, and then you can just put it back in your hangar. And then, of course, the last icon here is save. This is your quick game, save game, and has a couple options you can set. They're not anything that you really need to set. You can turn off background noise and sound effects, I guess, if you really want to, and the pinging sound when you get a new message. Okay, so our carrier's almost to Cerebus. All the islands have names, kind of cute. And let's see if our Manta is in range to be docked yet. Not quite yet. Let's see if our autopilot is... Yeah, our autopilot's spot on. It's just a matter of waiting for the ship to get there. Here we go, in range. So let's go ahead and tell our Manta to land. So you can look at the map and you can see the Manta doing its landing approach, or you can look at this hangar view, which I kind of like, and you can watch it come in. I believe it comes in from the left, which is the rear of the ship. Yeah, there it is. And the Manta is not really a fighter, it's kind of a hovercraft. When you're flying it, you can't send it to a hover, but you can actually send it to a really low speed. But when the AI is doing these operations, the AI is actually pretty good at sending it to a hover. Okay, so our carrier is at Cerebus. I'm going to go ahead and turn our ship around, and the reason for that is because the Walrus needs to eject from the back of the ship, and it's really annoying. Oh, by the way, you can see our Manta sitting on deck at the carrier driving view, which you don't really use that often. Like I said, mostly it's just you just come here to turn on autopilot. The big hand icon, by the way, is your emergency stop. It just sets your speed to 0 just immediately. Just boom, 0. Okay, anyway, enemies capturing another island. Let's go ahead and put our Mana back in our deck here, in our hangar. And we have Walrus 1 is ready to go. So let's go ahead and launch Walrus 1. Blub. I can't talk. It's already got its autopilot set, so let's go ahead and program the autopilot. And I think, yeah, when vehicles launch, they launch with autopilot turned on automatically, so that's great. I have a little local radar here. Shows you a dot for the carrier, and it draws the outline of the islands. Not particularly useful. I also have a rear view camera, so I can look behind me. You can see the carrier is very far to the right there. It's just coming into view. Anyway, the carrier is stopped. And then when the Walrus 1 encounters the beach, it does this cute little animation where it climbs over the beach, boom, plops back down, and continues on its way. When it's on ground, it can go full speed. You'll notice when it's in the water, it only goes half speed. One slight problem with the game is that when your Walrus is on autopilot, like I said, autopilot is just simply drawing a line. It will not avoid trees, which is very irritating. So anyway, let's go ahead and I'm just going to turn it basically 360 degrees. I'm going to set my payload here, and I'm going to drop my base building payload. And so what we can do here is let's drive out a little bit. I always thought this was one of the coolest bits of the game. So you can actually see where I dropped my base here. And if you stick here long enough, you can actually see it being constructed. So you can see that it's building itself. It starts out as a wireframe, but it will actually get outer textures once it's completed more. But basically, the game draws it kind of line by line. I always thought this was a really cool feature. And what you could do is islands have a little like the auto repair system in your ship. Islands also have an auto repair system. So if you shoot at this base, so if I don't remember if I loaded a laser, did I? Whoops. Hang on, I gotta switch to my laser. Oh, I did. So I can blow up trees. That's great. Trees are just cosmetic, except for your Walrus will take a little bit of damage if it hits them. Anyway, once this is entirely built, you can actually damage it, and you can watch it rebuild itself. It'll actually repair itself over time, which is kind of cool. Of course, I'm pretty sure you don't want to do that, because if it's a resource island or whatever, while it's repairing itself, it won't actually be generating resources, or if it's a factory island while it's repairing itself, it won't actually be, constructing new equipment for your carrier. I'm just going to wait here until this is finished so you can see what the building looks like. I think it's about done. And when the building is finished, you'll also see a little caption that says Cerebus is now a friendly island. And the great thing about this game is it's all simulated in 3D, so I could get my Manta and I could fly over this island and you'd actually see the walrus from the Manta. Oh, there we go. Cerebus is now a friendly island. You'd see the walrus from the Manta. You'd also see, you know, the carriers, and all of these objects are just there in the actual world. It's very, very cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and set the Walrus 1's autopilot to go back home. And we'll go ahead and have it go. You can actually barely see the carrier, just a couple of pixels from this distance, but you can see the carrier. So we've set the Walrus 1 to go to the ass end of the carrier. It looks like it's going to hit this tree and take a little bit of damage. Oh, it didn't. Okay, just barely missed it. Let's go down the beach. I always like that cute little animation. You can see that the island has actually started building other structures. So the structure that you saw getting built was just the first structure of the island. I think I made this a factory island. So what you'll see is if you stick around, in fact, we can actually watch that. Let's go ahead and let's grab a Manta. Like I said, these are fun to play with. So let's go ahead and let's take off. Let's fly our Manta around the island and take a look at it. And like I said, Mantas are hovercraft. They can go very slow. They can't go 0 miles an hour, but they can go very slow. And so you can get a good look at things, or you can actually get them going pretty fast too. You can see that my speed's there. Okay, so what you can see here is it's already constructed. I believe that's a defense turret there. That one gray thing that I'm kind of aimed at right now. I believe that will become a defense turret. So if the enemy carrier attacks, it will shoot at it. And it looks like it's building a factory right now, which is good because we told it to be a factory island. And the longer the island sits here, the more defenses and stuff it will build. I think it only builds a couple turrets per island or whatever. It's not, you know, hugely. It's not amazing, but it's pretty cool. And like I said, this all happens in real time in the game. Every island's simulated, even the ones that are out of view and the ones that belong to the enemy are all simulated. You can see my walrus on the left there. It's still heading towards the back end of the carrier, and obviously the carrier, I'm heading right towards it. So let's go ahead and get to this view, and it should be in range. Good, it is. We'll go ahead and set this man to go land again. There's no point to what I just did there. I was just, you know, dicking around to take a look at the world. Let's go ahead and have my Manta land. By the way, the Mantas cannot be refueled or repaired unless they're in the hangar. So when I played this game more seriously, I used to make it always a point to have an armed Manta always on the deck. But the Manta on deck will not use fuel until you take it off. But for instance, this Manta has we've just used up some of its gas, so we want to refuel it. As you can see, they don't have a ton of fuel. They really don't, and it doesn't need to be repaired. Okay, so let's go ahead and. By the way, if you look at this camera view, it'll actually show you the view of the rear of your carrier ship, and it shows the walrus in the rear of my ship waiting to dock here. So the walrus is inside the docking cone, so we can turn on auto dock, and the walrus will go ahead and dock. You can actually watch it from first person if you want. And it approaches the rear of the carrier. The big carrier doors open. The walrus ends up inside, and we go to a black screen that says the walrus is docked. Okay. So that's one island. We've captured one island. Now, obviously, if I was playing this seriously, the walrus has enough range that you can actually basically capture a couple islands from a single point. So I could have gone like halfway between these two islands. If I remember right, launched 2 walruses and grabbed the 2 islands. I didn't do that. Let's go ahead and get our carrier moving to the next island. And like I said, the carrier, 99.9% of the time, you use the autopilot. You can control it manually. It's really sluggish and kind of annoying to do so. So here's our map view again. Here's our carrier. So one interesting thing about the map view is you can look at your resource grid. So all of the islands, once you've created a base on an island, it gets connected to some islands based on these underground tunnels, I assume is what they are. Basically what they are is their supply lines. So now that we've created a factory island there, we have our stockpile island, which is Vulcan at the moment. It will actually create, like, for instance, the factory island might create a new base building tool, which is what we used in the Walrus. The Walrus dropped a thing that builds a base. And when it does that, it will actually get sent to the stockpile island via this blue line, which is some kind of underground resource thing. I'm not sure exactly how it works. We can get a little more information on, Burn is the island we're heading towards, I suppose. it's the centered one. And as you can see, not every island connects to every other island. So our stockpile island here in the lower left does not connect directly to burn. It only connects via the island that we just captured. So that adds a little bit of depth to it. Let's see, what else is there to talk about? I think I've gone through pretty much all the features of the game. Obviously, the challenge of the game here is you have to juggle multiple walruses, multiple mantas, and sometimes fight the enemy carriers. And the enemy carriers, there are a few ways to take advantage of their AI to kill them very easily. Well, first of all, reading up on this game when I was, making this video, trying to figure out the emulator, one thing I learned is that the enemy carrier will actually sometimes get stuck inside an island because of a bug. And when that happens, you basically all you need to do is grab all the islands and you've won. You can't really destroy the enemy carrier because it's stuck inside an island. And so it's just a matter of just waiting. And the other strategy someone mentioned is that the enemy carrier has these devastating surface-to-surface missiles that can destroy you, but it doesn't aim them correctly. So if you set your ship to a low speed and have it keep going on autopilot, you can actually basically dodge all of the enemy carrier's most destructive attacks and basically defeat it that way, and then just hit it with your ship's main laser as soon as it gets in range. Whoops, I hit the wrong button here. What was I going to do? Okay. This game is entirely mouse controlled, which is pretty innovative for the time. I think it came out in 1988, but it's not like tremendously great mouse control particularly, but it is mouse controlled. So we just changed the course of our carrier. Oh, by the way, this speed also applies to your autopilot speed. So if I set that low and hit change course, it would go slower. And the carrier is pretty damn fast, to be honest. It goes at a good clip. It really does. So, yeah. So anyway, the goal of the game, obviously, is to... Well, I guess it's not obvious. I don't know why I said that. But the goal of the game is to capture more islands than the enemy. The enemy carrier is actually here operating right now. The enemy carrier is doing exactly what we're doing. It's going around capturing islands. And like I said, everything is 100% simulated all of the time. So the enemy islands are getting built the same way our islands get built. And if I sent a manta over one of them, which they don't have the range for that, but if I could, and you would actually see the enemy bases getting built. Each island has its own little turrets. And anyway, it's pretty slick. And the enemy carrier's hit points basically depends on how many islands the enemy has at that moment. And so the goal here is to capture as many islands as you can, deprive the enemy of as many islands as you can, and then eventually you get to a fight with the enemy carrier and destroy the enemy carrier, at which point it gives you a decision. You can just say, hey, I win, or it basically says you can keep playing and capture all the islands if you want to go ahead and be a completionist and finish capturing all the islands. They're not extremely challenging to capture. It's basically, you can send a manta. And I think I talked about this a little bit. But you send a manta over with like a ground attack laser or a bunch of missiles and take out all of its defenses. It doesn't take all that long. And then you can you send your walrus with the virus that basically puts the virus in the command center. I seem to recall that you can't put the virus in the command center until the defenses are gone, or your walrus will most likely get destroyed. So, there you go. Anyway, this is the classic carrier command. This is the Amiga version. The version I played was the Mac Classic version. So if you're not familiar with this game, now you are. If you're a little kid or younger than I am, you're probably looking at this and going, this graphics are awful. It's like there's only polygons. It's really blocky. It's like, well, this game was released in, I think, 1988. This is state-of-the-art shit. This is state-of-the-art for 1988. So it was a pretty impressive game. The way that it simulates an entire universe is pretty impressive. And the way that all of the vehicles... I mean, all this stuff sounds trivial now, but the way that the universe is consistent, so that if you're in a walrus looking at a manta flying over the ship, you actually see the manta flying over the ship. Stuff like that's pretty amazing. Like, a lot of games in this time would only draw what was relevant to gameplay at that exact moment and not things that it could get away without drawing, just as, general optimization. So, anyway, that is the classic carrier command. Hope you enjoyed this video.